Thank you. A couple of things we have to be concerned about with gas pipelines and gas situations here. The pipeline issue is really a double-edged sword. Typically, a pipeline doesn't cause a heck of a lot of damage to your property value. The pipeline doesn't. And no one incident makes or breaks a market. If they cut your land in half, yes, it's going to cause diminution in value. I was doing a study up in Pike County 2 years ago, and we had a whole ton of information that told me that the pipeline is going to diminish land value. And that was particularly big pieces of land, 1,000 acres, 500 acres, that size piece. Looking around for trying to find houses that have sold with pipelines on them. I found that Dave Chance, one of Dave Chance's salespeople, sold this house. It was about a 1950s, early 60s Cape Cod, in nice shape, but of that vintage. When you stepped off the front porch of that pipeline onto the lawn, you were on the easement right on top of that pipeline. It was right next to the house. So I called up to the young lady who sold his house and I said, what was your buyer's reaction to the pipeline in the front yard? She said, they sure was nice of that gas company to put all that topsoil and beautiful sod down right in front of the house. That blew my whole idea of diminution in value as far as single-family homes are concerned. If you start talking about large tracts, they'll cut your land in half. We had that in Shahola Township. The pipeline company promised to put a crossing across the pipeline so that they could build houses back in there. I spoke with that gentleman once down in Dallas, Texas. I believe it was Dallas or Houston, I'm not sure which. And we talked and he said, oh yeah, we'll put it in for them. They just tell us where we want it. Several calls and God only knows how many emails later, he never returned one, which tells me he wasn't being totally truthful with me. So we weren't very happy about that one. In another instance, up in, again, Pike County, gentleman owns 1,000 acres of ground. That's a big piece of land. He had 16 lots cut out of that. And we were back in there with an ATV. And he was showing me these lots. And the pipeline went right in front of the lots so that they couldn't access these 16 lots. When you looked out over those lots, you were looking back at Pocono Manor in Mount Pocono, and we were up in Pike County in Shahola Township. How do I know that? I lived in Mount Pocono for 17 years, and if you go to what they call the Knob in Mount Pocono, you can look all the way up to High Point, New York. We were up just outside High Point, New York, looking back, and you could see Pocono Manor. Those lots are worth a lot of money. They were 5 acres apiece, and the pipeline, people just put their pipeline right down the middle of it and didn't care. So you gotta be careful when you're dealing with these pipeline people. Sometimes they won't be totally truthful with you. They don't care if they destroy your property values. Now I watched the video that Scott sent me on that plant, I guess not too far from here. If you have a plant or anything that's creating noise or a disturbance to your property, that's called external depreciation. It's a diminution in value from outside your property boundaries, across the street, down the street, whatever it is. Your problem with that is trying to quantify that damage. The tape that Scott sent me said, people said, I wonder what's happened to my property values. What's going down? There's no question about that. But the problem is, how do you quantify that damage? Is it $100, $1,000, $100,000? What is it? And the only way you can do that, and this is what people don't understand, is we have to find, first we have to identify where similar plants are located. Then we have to find houses that have sold near those similar plants. And you can't use just one. Because if we use just one, then that girl up in Pike County who thought the pipeline was, people were great putting the grass in, that's your market. But one sale doesn't make a market. So we have to find 3, 4, 5, 6 sales of properties near a facility like the one that's down the street here that have sold. Then we've got to find 6 properties like the ones that sold that aren't near such a property, and you'll have a difference. That difference isn't going to be exactly the same. It's going to be a range, 20, 30, 40%, whatever it happens to be. And it's going to be like 20% to 25%, or 30% to 40%, or some such thing. And then we have to look at location. You've all heard the expression location, location, location. I think you live out here in the back mountain. Property values are a lot higher here on the back mountain than they are in Edwardsville. Do people live here, am I right or wrong? Pretty much, I guess, yeah. I've done a good bit of work in this area. But so you gotta look at the location of the ones that sold without the influence of a plant and the ones that sold with the influence of plants. So there's a whole bunch of juggling acts to be done here. It isn't cheap. It takes a huge amount of time. And that's the big problem. The average homeowner can't afford it. It's not that your appraisers we want to get rich. If I wanted to get rich, I wouldn't be in the appraisal business. But I have these bad habits. I like to pay my mortgage. I like to have 3 meals a day. You know, I like to buy clothes for me and my family, that kind of thing. We have to be paid for our time. You can't be volunteering months and months of time. And that's the problem you face. And I don't know, Todd could probably answer you better if there's any way there's any kind of assistance for the homeowner to find out what that diminution in value is. And it depends. Todd and I did one up in Susquehanna County, actually 3 houses. And they wouldn't know any diminution. There was a lot of noise from the plant nearby. And the one guy just used the house, you know, on occasional weekends in the summertime. Another person lived there full time. The third fella was a doctor who was studying to be a surgeon, and this was his respite to study. You can't study when there's a big noise all around you. So his diminution was bigger than the other 2. And again, it's that juggling issue that we all have to deal with. Okay? As far as them putting a pipeline through your property or near it, we had an explosion in Marshall's Creek about 15, maybe 20 years ago. It was at Christmas time, and I was at a Christmas party with some other brokers and a couple of lawyers, and we were looking out across the mountain, and all of a sudden the whole valley lit up. This thing blew up. You could see it. We were probably 25, 30 miles away. Right, so it does occur. If you remember 2 summers ago, I think, the one exploded in Allentown and took out a whole block. That can happen. I was involved with a case over in Wisconsin where a pipeline, before we had a Wetlands Act, they were developing suburbs back in the 60s. And they ran a pipeline underneath the electric line between the Canadian border and the Mexican border right down through the state of Wisconsin, Brookfield, Wisconsin. Lo and behold, somebody in 1990 was digging on that pipeline down in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Nicked the pipeline people went out and looked at it and said it was just a scratch on the surface of the paint. Well, years went by and it started to leak. And it fanned out, and nobody realized it because natural gas is heavier than air and has no odor. Nobody knew how long it leaked. But when it found an ignition point, it exploded, and everything, people, animals, houses, plants, everything was instantly incinerated. That was my first experience with a pipeline, and it scared the heart and soul out of me. So, you know, it's something you have to be considering after what we just saw here about people that weren't taking care of these things. That's scary. I think if you're going to have something like that coming through this community, you better make sure that somebody's taking care of it. Okay? I got 1 minute, they're telling me to shut up, so. With that, I'll just let it go. We all need employment, there's no question about it, but we don't need to see our houses blow up, okay? I'll sit down. If you have questions, I'll take them later.